Reading from Dallas Pimiento, Book 2. I'm Bronco 2, Part 1. Women Are Lonely. While their husbands were at the zoo, the three women, who were at Fan's house, where if the men were successful they would return with the pangolin, found themselves, without any conscious decision at all, watching TV. The program they chose to watch, again without any real deliberation, was Pronounced Wolf-Like Attributes, an old comedy from the time when the three women were but girls. They watched it attentively, but allowed themselves the freedom to talk as they did so. "I used to watch this every afternoon at my grandmother's house," Rita said. "Every afternoon?" Molly questioned. "How old were you?" "I guess about 10, Rita answered. She pictured herself at 10, a thin girl in a pale yellow dress with a matching hairband. "This show has been in syndication since then?" Molly couldn't believe it. She thought she remembered watching it when it first came out, a nighttime show. Yet she was the same age as Rita. Should that make her feel younger than she thought, or older? "They put it into syndication right after it was canceled," Fan told them. How did she know that? The other two wondered. The answer was that Fan didn't just watch TV. She read about it. On the episode they were watching, Carton, the owner of the drive-in, was anxious about an upcoming date he had with an old flame. He hadn't seen her in 20 years. Would she think he had gotten too fat, too hairy? The boys from the bunker were as supportive as they could be, given the fact that at the same time, their old nemesis, Inspector Smedge, was back in town, once again trying to pin old Mrs. Doris's murder on one of them. Thank God for Mandy. Pronounced wolf-like attributes ended. The next program, Saggin' Behind, had just started when the women heard the truck pull up in the driveway. They left the TV on and hurried to the back door, where they watched Molden and Ted go to the back of the truck and unload a struggling something wrapped in a length of burlap. Andy went to where the women were. "Stand back," he ordered. "Did you get it?" Rita asked. "Yeah," Andy replied. The other two men carried their burden into the kitchen. They lowered it gently to the floor. The burlap was soon removed, and there stood the tall, magnificent bird for all of them to marvel over. An electrician. I had no studio audience on Saggin' Behind, the discursive TV show I hosted for 2 years. When I made my opening remarks each episode, it was to the camera alone I spoke. I interviewed approximately 100 guests during the run of the show, each one a thorough non-entity. The one that stands out in my mind above them all, however, at least for the purposes of this story, was the poet Stan Airstale. "I'm an electrician of sorts," he told me during the course of our conversation. "Indeed," I chuckled. "I wondered if you would read something for us." "Like what?" "Like page 72 of your book, Totentanz." I pointed at the post-it marked book he held in his lap. "If you want me to," he sighed. "That would be great," I said, for lack of anything better to say. Then Airstale read his poem, shocked again. "Copyright restrictions forbid my reprinting it here, much as I would like to. Even if I could, your experience reading it would not be equal to mine listening to the poet himself read it in his coarse, uneducated monotone. Not long afterwards, our main camera suffered some kind of malfunction, one that threatened to make the rest of our shooting day a more than usually arduous one. Airstale immediately rose from his chair and went to take a look at the camera, claiming that he could probably repair it. While he and a couple of the college students I employed as staff tinkered around, I retreated to the backstage area. "This show isn't working out as I had hoped," I confessed to Conchita, whose exact job on the program escapes me now. I helped myself to a donut. "It's just a camera," the dusky girl rejoined. No, I'm not talking about today's incident. I mean the whole show. From the decor, which I had envisioned as a 70s retro thing with carpet on the walls and an otherwise stark set, to these crappy guests. "I fixed your camera," I heard Airstale say behind me. "Oh, great. So I'm a crappy guest, huh?" "Well, you're not Robert Lowell or Ted Hughes," I tried to make light of it. "Who are they?" Driving me crazy. Some took it literally. That was a shame, because a guy like me is joking more than half the time. I laughed off their concern, not too derisively, for I might one day need a ride to the mental hospital, and headed down to the lobby. "You could use some music playing over the PA in here," the man waiting for me told me within seconds of our shaking hands. "The hell I could," I snapped. You like it so quiet in here? He was a man as I am a man, but I could see it in his face, hear it in his voice. He liked sports. He was a man who discussed films in terms of how much business they did. He probably felt a barely articulated reverence for religious things, although he hadn't been to church in years. I do. Don't you think your customers might prefer a little background music? We don't really have customers here, Mr. Gomez, and any that might wander in are in the main people that know how we operate. I don't care about the rest of them. Ted Gomez inhaled. Where does that put me? He asked. I guess you can join me in my office if you're still of a mind to do so. Sure, he agreed, and followed me upstairs. What a tiny office you have, he said as we entered. It's intimate. It's all I need. Really, the whole building is my office. Don't think I'm trying to insult you, Mr. Ash. It's just that compared to the size of the rest of the building, well, I envisioned something more palatial. I like it crowded. I had motioned Gomez to a seat before my desk. After he sat, I took my place behind the desk. What exactly may I do for you, Mr. Gomez? I asked. Well, he hesitated only a moment, getting his bearings, I suppose, or gathering ballast for what he had to say. I understand you knew Rectus Aimwell. Yes. Are you aware that his real name was Dr. Lemuel Tennis? Very little escapes me, Mr. Gomez. I guess that's why I'm going crazy. Excuse me? Gomez's eyes widened. Too much going on upstairs, I pointed up my head. Modesty of the Torn. An old song embedded in the electronics of the butter dish brought tears to Dallas Pimento's eyes. It's so unnecessary, he managed to splutter, before collapsing in the pile of polyester scraps heaped up on the table. He's had a hard day, George, Benita explained to her husband. Why don't you help him upstairs to the spare room? Why, he's light as a feather, George Stratagem, that old simulacrum of a farmer, declared as he hefted Pimiento over his shoulder. Benita wondered what kind of food people subsisted on in the big, brutal city of atheists that made them so weak. Pimiento opened his eyes on the rafters overhead. This is the spare room, he thought. He made sure that George was gone before he rose from the crude pallet he had been laid upon and tiptoed to the old trunk. If there weren't any answers in here, he told himself, he might as well go home and write a book. That proved as unnecessary as the teeny rendition of Take My Breath Away that played every time one opened the butter dish, because inside the trunk was the book he had been looking for. From my position in the cabbage frame, I saw Pimiento at the attic window. I waved at him. With some difficulty, he managed to get the window open so he could throw the book out. Excellent, I said to myself. The secret history of Ted Gomez's business operations was now in my grasp. The cover was a little dirty, having landed in the sweet potato patch, but I didn't foresee that hampering my enjoyment of the product. I had a horse and cart hidden in the woods, and to them I now returned, spending the remainder of the night greedily reading the handwritten manuscript by lantern. In the morning, as a supposedly refreshed Dallas Pimiento continued his pilgrimage into the Hercules Mountains, it was an easy matter to casually give him a ride. How are you? I asked him. Stuffed, he said, patting his belly. We had a big breakfast. Blueberry pancakes, fried eggs, cheese grits. Yuck, eggs. I made a face. What did you have? Information. I'm your friend. Ted Gomez, who had just begun growing a mustache, walked off the sidewalk and down a flight of steps. He entered a low-ceilinged room. It's getting warmer, he said idly to the two small women at desks to either side of the entrance. Yes, I like spring, answered one. She motioned with her pen further inside. Go on back, she invited Gomez. Thanks, Gomez smiled. Although he would not have mussed his hair if he had walked fully erect, he still hunched slightly. The ceiling was immediately over his head. The old wooden floor, covered many layers thick with thin carpeting, dipped here and there and creaked as he walked. He fingered the incipient mustache. Soon he would be unrecognizable. He liked that idea. At the rear of the room, full of filing cabinets and stacked boxes, he passed into a narrow hallway running perpendicular to that room and turned to the right, deeper into the building and further away from the street. Posters for various programs offered by the agency whose quarters these were lined the walls, along with other posters of a purely inspirational nature. For example, as he passed by Dr. Seth DeMoom's office, he noted one that was an aerial photograph of Solfeggio Castle and captioned in big yellow letters, "Don't eat eggs without salt." Finally, Gomez came to the room he wanted, the one at the end of the hall. He knocked twice softly and entered. And here we come to our story proper. I like to put adjectives after the antecedents. It makes me sound fancy. If I have rambled up until now, I apologize, but you might as well get used to it, for there will be much rambling to come. In fact, you might say that all I do is ramble. I don't really have anything to say. I'm making it all up as I go along. I can admit these things to you. The fact that I, as narrator, am willing to admit that, yes, I am your narrator, gives this extended and discursive narrative a special flavor, don't you think? But don't think for a moment that this has been easy for me. Not at all. It is difficult for me to struggle blindly through this rabbit warren of characters, places, visions, conversations, and ideas, and keep some kind of connecting chain running through it all. Have a little pity for me. I'm your friend. At least I try to be. I've done all this work for you, the discriminating reader, the reader who's bored with all these ordinary works of fiction, with their tedious concern with plot. One of my treasured. It may have been a mistake, but on the 31st of that month, I began wearing a crown. In a small ceremony attended by a few close friends and a legion of artificially animated puppets and stuffed animals, the last two groups of which were intended to fill up the remainder of the chairs, the crown was officially placed on my head for the first time. Of course, I had already worn it informally about the house, getting the feel of it, and, as I had constructed it myself, had had to put it on during the construction process to make sure it fit. You say you made that crown yourself? Extraordinary, Richardson said to me at the reception following the coronation. What was the method by which you constructed it, and what materials did you use? Asked Daisy from the Landsash fan club. She had a notebook and a pen in her hands. The method was make it up as you go along, I informed her, and the materials were cardboard, house paint, spray lacquer, and various broken toy parts. The man who had placed the crown on my head, Mr. Thorpe, approached me as I took my first sip of punch. I'll be going now, if you don't mind, he said. Not at all. Thanks for coming. We shook hands. I slipped him a 20, and he departed back to his endless toil, I suppose. So, what are you king of? Dallas Pimiento asked me. Nothing, really. I just thought it would be nice to wear a crown. I don't believe you. I think you're hiding something. I'm not. Well, I'm going to find out. Pimiento gulped down his punch and stormed out. Most of the other guests left soon after, leaving me alone with the puppets and dead-eyed bears. This is some party, eh? I asked Stan Global, an orange puppet with green hair. Yes, I had a great time, he responded. Thanks for the honesty. I wore the crown to bed that night, and in the morning had some difficulty finding it. I finally looked under the bed and found not only the crown, but an old lunchbox I had lost many years ago. On its sides were images from some old TV show that I had never got to see. The mysterious nature of these images was all the more evocative for my ignorance. You have violated. It interests me that the goat, which had up until now only been as far as the thin stream that ran between the meadow and the forest, one day decided to splash through the trees and enter the unknown territory under the trees. Splash through the water and enter the unknown territory under the trees. He had not gone far into the woods when he stood up on his hind legs and undid a zipper that ran down the middle of his chest. He stepped out of his goaty skin and hung the skin on a short branch. Standing there naked, he now appeared to be a man. He wandered as far as a little clearing he found in the middle of the woods wherein stood a small cottage. Inside he found clothing and a radio. As he tied his shoes, he listened to the news of the outside world. The stripper who escaped police custody this morning has allegedly killed again, the announcer began his broadcast by informing the goat. I still call him the goat because at this point he still considered himself to be a goat, even though he looked like a man. The news continued for some minutes as he stood before the radio fully dressed, but as there seemed to be nothing in it about goats or of much import for them, he switched it off. In the kitchen he found nothing more to eat than a box of Rice Krispies. Oddly enough, one might think he poured them into a bowl. However, it is not so odd when one considers that he was tying his shoes and listening to the radio only moments earlier. He had to eat them dry as there was no milk. I have not forgotten that I told you there was naught else to eat in that kitchen. The goat man, we will call him that, for in truth, does he not look like a man in our imaginations? Pulled a magazine out of a stack on the seat of the chair beside his own. Hard Brain, a story by John Smoot, caught his eye, and flipping through innumerable pages of clothing ads and political cartoons, he found the story, illustrated on the opposite page in the distinctive macaroni and glue images of Père Lambouthnot. He was just getting interested in the story and learning not a few things as well when the black wall-mounted telephone rang. "Fuck a pig!" A common expression with him escaped his lips. He answered the phone, however, in a sweeter tone of voice. "Hello," he said. "Hello, is this Roddy?" an elderly voice asked. "Yes," he replied without any hesitation. Names in Latin. A recurring image with me is a table connected to a disproportionately large head. Such a person was in residence at the Born Pity Library. Now, it was not I who brought the offering of pine nuts and barbecue sauce to the person, but an acquaintance who told me the story later. His name was Dallas Pimiento. The name of the table-legged person, the precise term for whom escapes me at the moment, was Schodfeld. Schodfeld the Macklin, some called him, but not as I understand to his face or within his hearing. "Do you ever wear a hat?" Pimiento asked Schodfeld after presenting him with the food. "I have never found one big enough to fit me," replied the talking table. Nodding thoughtfully, Pimiento took his leave of Schodfeld and walked down to the 5th floor. "Why didn't you take the elevator?" I asked Pimiento. "I needed the exercise," he explained. "On the 5th floor are shelved all the history books. I hunted through them for any reference to the Tunapis." "Excuse me," I interrupted again. "What are Tunapises?" "Tables with big heads on them, like Schodfeld. I thought you knew that. Anyway, I found little relevant information until I actually began to relax and enjoy myself. Just as I was becoming engrossed in the history of socialist activism in the 1960s Europe, I found it. A multi-volume work on the Tunapsis' involvement with post-war art." "That's very interesting," I said. "Was there any mention of Schodfeld himself in this work?" "Not that I could find. Actually, I didn't spend much time going through it. I returned to the 8th floor to show the 3 books in the series to Schodfeld." "Was Joseph Beuys mentioned?" I asked. Pimiento ignored me and continued with his tale. "But I never got a chance to show Schodfeld. Approaching the room wherein he lived out his simple life of meditation and conceptual art, I noticed that he now had visitors. He seemed to know these people far better than he knew me. Friends of his, I suppose. I found that shocking at the time. I don't know why. There was no reason why he shouldn't have friends. I guess I thought in my narrow-minded way that I would be his friend. I don't need any more friends myself," I told Pimiento. "To fight me. You will need the combined strength of the Honey Bun and Bear Claw Manufacturers Association and the Forest Dwellers, the Men of the Trees, as we called them in my day, which wasn't really so long ago. But what with the vast changes that have swept our shared world, I feel as though my day dawned and darkened well before the rise of your precious singularity of electronically extended consciousness. It is your day now, but it won't avail you any. Your monomaniacal nervous system has no power over me, and you will never succeed in getting the pastry people and the treatment to help you, much less work together. Just to prove my point, I have established an outpost within the traditional boundaries of the Forest Dwellers' territory, and am even now in the process of establishing one within the vending machine industry's domain, which, as you must know by now, is but an adjunct to the above-mentioned Manufacturers Association. My sometime friend and unwitting agent, Dallas Pimiento, has been charged with this task. Do not wonder that I am telling you these things. By the time you read this, I will be long dead, and my machinations will have already borne the fruit they were designed to produce. Although these words will be under your nose for the entire span of my vulnerable stage, I am confident you won't read them. Why, only this weekend I sat invisible, along with representatives of my collected works, in a convention hall brimming with like-minded freaks. As they socialized among themselves and examined each other's labors, I read Ionesco undisturbed, a silent nonentity whose foundation-disrupting volumes of text and illustration remained, and yet remain, unread, unappreciated, and unsold. That last sentiment is mere quibbling on my part. I'm not in this struggle for the money. The booty I gather from the battlefield only goes to further the cause, not to fund endless luxuries. You would not believe the mental outlay necessary to keep it all going. Dallas Pimiento and the various operations he is involved in alone cost as much energy and material as are needed to maintain the existence of Paris in the 20 years following its most recent liberation. Of course, I have many other projects in the works besides those involving Pimiento. He is but one example, and I know what you are thinking. Even if you should manage to turn him against me and add his weight to your side, I should still best you in all that you throw at me, for are you not a tepid little critic? We'll stop there for today.